How's it going, everyone? So today we have another special guest today on my channel. We have Greta Aurora. For those of you watching on YouTube, you may not know that this is actually my second time talking to Greta because the first time I spoke to her was on a video with Elizabeth Hobson that was put on my BitChute channel. That's a BitChute exclusive. We had fun there, so you should definitely check that one out. But right now I got some one-on-one time with Greta to talk about. Well, it's been a crazy past month or two, hasn't it? How have things been for you?
I'm okay. I mean, I never get bored. I always keep myself busy. I've been making videos, doing a lot of research, reading.
So I guess we can talk a little bit about like, well, there's a lot to talk about men and women's, like, how things are between us right now. What with the whole Marilyn Manson thing to even more extreme cases like that murder of that one girl in the UK, right?
Yeah.
Right.
The Sarah Everard murder, it has been all over the news for over a week now. And it's very bad. Obviously, it is very tragic. But this just shows the fact that everyone is talking about it right now shows how rare these things are. When something like this does happen, and it doesn't happen in the UK more often than a couple of times a year, maybe not even that, but when it does, everyone is outraged and everyone uses it to further their own agenda. And I find it quite disgusting the way a lot of feminists have taken this opportunity to talk about how they feel terrified at night walking to their car, and how apparently every woman holds her keys in between her fingers. Well, in the UK, because we're not allowed to carry any weapons to defend ourselves, not even pepper spray, which is quite ridiculous. I think everyone should be allowed to, well, that's a completely different topic, but I mean, at least pepper spray, if not a gun.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like, because here's the thing, I just don't think it's that unique on the part of women to just hold on to your keys on the way to your car. Because, like when I'm, parked out on the street, I feel this, inside I feel it the same way, but, I'm not just kind of freaking out all the time, it's like the concern is there, right? And so it just seems to me like women get to really voice how scared they are. But in the case of men, not only we're not really supposed to voice it, when trouble happens, we're supposed to throw ourselves at it. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, not only that, but feminists really these recent events have shown that a lot of even mainstream feminists think of all men as potential rapists, and they hold all men somehow responsible for what this one lunatic had done, who was obviously very sick. And I've seen a lot of threads on Twitter where guys try to make this exact same point, that women are not the only ones who are scared. And you can talk about actual facts, you can talk about actual crime statistics. Men are a lot more likely to be attacked, to be mugged, not to mention to be killed.
Exactly.
So you can see that these hysterical cries are not rooted in any reality whatsoever. And obviously everyone should be able to express if they are scared, but we should also see just the idea of being scared. We should see it within the context of how extremely fortunate we are to be living in the current time in the West, because there has never been a safer time. I personally haven't really felt unsafe in London. There could have been a couple of very isolated instances where I heard drunk people smash bottles on the street or something like that. But I can count on one hand how many times it even occurred to me that someone might attack me, and I never even, I guess I'm lucky I haven't experienced any attacks, anything like that. But yeah, so one thing that really bothers me about the way feminists approach this murder is that they call for more legislation, more regulation. that's one thing. That's their first proposed solution. The second solution is let's teach men not to rape and not to attack women. And I think both of these solutions really miss the point by very, very far. I don't believe we can legislate ourselves into safety, at least not without giving up our freedom. And I don't think feminists have ever really wanted true freedom for women, but maybe some of the very early feminists, had some kind of actual tangible equality in mind. I doubt they did, but it's possible. But these days, it's definitely not about that. It's all about safety and security. And in my view, that's exactly the safety and security a lot of women back in the day wanted to free themselves from. And free is kind of the key word. When you talk about the liberation of anyone, liberty, freedom entails danger and risk.
Right.
And we should be, if we are free, then we are free to take risks, and we should celebrate that freedom, because in a lot of cultures, women don't have that freedom. And I talk about this in one of my latest videos, like in Saudi Arabia, for example, women are very safe. And if you look at murder rates, the percentages of women and men murdered in countries all around the world, Saudi Arabia has one of the fewest rates of female murder of females.
Right.
It's something like 90% of people murdered are men in Saudi Arabia. In Western countries, it's still a lot more men. Exactly. But it's more like 30% or 40% women. Right. So that says a lot about which countries are safe. And do you really want that sort of safety? And I would advise a lot of these feminists to move to Saudi Arabia if they really want to be safe.
Right. Yeah, because a lot of the time, when these type of people speak in any way positive about freedom, they might say it in terms of freedom from responsibility or freedom from consequences. So it's like an opposite kind of freedom that you and I tend to espouse.
It's a negative form of freedom.
Exactly.
So there was a very interesting book that came out by a French philosopher. I can't remember his name. It came out about 6 years ago. And it's titled The Freedom of the Marionette. I think that was the title. And it's nothing groundbreaking, but what he was talking about basically is that the marionette puppet is the safest, or with a certain mindset, you can view that puppet as the safest entity because it has to make no decisions for itself.
Right.
Its strings are literally being pulled and it has no free will, no agency. But then that can be interpreted as a kind of safety. And there are certain people, there are certain people whose idea of freedom is really defined in this negative sense, as you say, freedom from things.
Right. And on the idea of security, it seems to me that, I think taking control of your own safety by way of self-defense, using the freedom, I think is a better way to go than just kind of relying on perhaps like legislation, like to make things safe. That's that kind of thing. It's like, because you yourself just mentioned that, weapons aren't allowed even for self-defense, not even pepper spray. And well, like, if that's somebody's idea of safety, then yeah, they're a little screwed in the head, aren't they?
Yeah, that's pretty messed up. And then obviously more kind of CCTV and surveillance. Again, that's the kind of thing feminists are calling for in the UK right now. And the government is obviously quite delighted to fulfill those expectations because, I guess it can be quite a positive thing for them to be able to keep a very close eye on all the citizens in a country. And again, one could argue that, you know, if I haven't done anything wrong, why can they not watch me?
Yeah.
But there's, I think, the right to privacy, the right to a private life is quite an important right too.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I mean, so I'm actually not terribly familiar with what all went down with the Sarah Everard murder. Was the violence just a matter of a killing, or was there sexual violence involved?
I think based on what they've told the press so far, she was raped and then murdered. And what makes it particularly bad is that it was a policeman.
Yeah, right.
Who murdered her. I don't know if they knew each other. I don't think they've. Last time I checked, they haven't said anything about that. But I have a feeling they must have known each other.
I see. But in any way, it seems like a big way to kind of capitalize on this murder to have have another kind of victim celebration occasion happening. Like kind of just like because I was kind of afraid that this was going to be like the whole George Floyd thing all over again. Except it's a sex thing, not a race thing. Yeah, I was very worried about that.
Yeah, I had the exact same. Yeah. Sex version, the feminist version of the George Floyd thing has been happening
Exactly.
for many years.
Yeah.
You have these eruptions of passion, like very concentrated eruptions that happen every once in a while, but it's in the news all the time. Like I actually have Google alerts set for daily alerts for gender equality and feminism, and there's not a single day when they don't mention violence against women in the news.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's like on the flip side, violence against men is, unless they can put that racial spin on it, it's almost never mentioned. It's kind of like way in the back burner at best. So that's a.
And as I said before, men are much more likely to fall victim to violent crime. But when you say this to a feminist, and I've had this happen a couple of times recently, what they say to you is that when a woman is murdered, it's because she's a woman. And when a man is murdered, he's just murdered, And it is just, it's madness.
Right,
I just can't get my head around. Why would anyone be murdered because of their sex? It just makes no sense.
Right. I mean, I would almost counter that person and say, well, if it's like, if it's a man, then it's okay to murder him, So there might be something about, just playing hypothetical, like devil's advocate, like, maybe,
That's what they sound like. You're right. I mean, that's what those people sound like.
Exactly. Right.
We don't really hear about, as you say, not only do we not talk about the issue of violence against men, but we don't even hear in the news about specific cases of men being murdered. If you think about it, like what was the last time they made such a big deal out of a man's murder? And that's true not just for murder, but I was thinking about this in relation to the allegations against Marilyn Manson. I was watching this exclusive interview with Esme Bianco, one of the accusers.
Yep.
She was the one who, whenever Rachel Wood came out with her first allegations, Esme Bianco posted on Instagram that she's not yet ready to name her abuser, but when the time is right, she will do that. She just needs more time. A week later, exclusive interview with Good Morning America. Obviously, it was in the works already. It was like drip fed to people. And people weren't obsessing over it for too long, but for a few days, for like almost a week, it was in the news, and every major news outlet covered it. And I actually tweeted about this, like, what would it take for a man to get the same amount of media attention?
Right.
It's unthinkable unless he commits a crime. But like as a victim, like what terrible, horrendous crime could possibly happen to a man for that to make the news, unless maybe he's already very famous.
Right. Yeah, that's one thing. And once again, if they can put that racial spin on it, you know, like I heard some, I believe it was a Chinese guy that got murdered by a black guy, but the narrative was, you know, stop white supremacy, you know, after this whole thing. So unless they can pin that kind of minority spin on it, you know, men are useless, living and dead.
You are very right, actually, because the George Floyd case was comparable. And exactly because you had that racial element, that's why it was such big news.
Right, yeah. Yeah, like speaking of the whole George Floyd thing, you know, back to feeling, you know, scared to step out of your doorstep, you know, like I was kind of like scared for both myself and my wife to step out because of how close this thing happened to us. So it's like, you know, like, is somebody going to be riding down the street or something like that? That's the kind of stuff that was on my mind, you know, and, you know, like I was just kind of really unsettled. Like I wasn't like breaking out in tears or anything like that, but but you know, it's like it was like on the forefront of my mind for like a long time around that time. So.
And the Derek Chauvin trial is happening at the moment,
Right.
isn't it?
I believe so, yes.
What was the atmosphere like? Do you notice anything unusual?
You mean when it happened?
No, these days, because the trial is happening. I mean, are there any people gathering or protesting or anything like that?
Well, I think this is a good thing, is that I haven't seen anything, you know, of that going on right now. But yeah, things have been kind of unusually quiet on that front. Maybe it's because, you know, like I don't go out that much anymore. But you know, it's things. Yeah. It's like it's not as tense as when the riots first started, because you know, yeah, that was just a tense time. Like, you know, I was out driving and I saw people looting some convenience stores. So it's like, you know, I shouldn't be here, kind of thing. Like, you know, right? Like businesses were boarded up and everything.
But they've removed the boards by now.
Yeah. Since then, yeah, right. Like, and a lot of the buildings and businesses are reconstructed. You know, some of them had burnt down, but now they've been brought up again. So, you know, I mean, you know, it's good to see that, you know, things are looking like they return to normal again. But I'm still just kind of, you know, it's not even been a year yet, right? I mean, that was May last year. So I'm just kind of, you know, the weather's starting to get warm again, so maybe they'll start being a little bit more out and about again, is kind of my big worry, you know. What's the next tragedy?
I wonder what the anniversary will be like.
Oh, yeah, like, yeah, it's gonna be like, well, I don't have any good thoughts on, well, what to expect when it comes to that. So, yeah, but back to things like Marilyn Manson for just a bit more. Maybe I kind of want to bring up the subject of the demonization of male sexuality. I know you touched on this a little bit with Colonel Kurtz and you guys' talk, right? So, but you know, it's like in more general terms, you know, whereas men are mocked for not being able to get women or to have sex, and they're incels or something like that, at the same time make one misstep and you're just as demonized. So there seems no recourse here. Like, what's a guy to do here?
Yeah, it sounds like the only way feminists would approve of your sexuality as a man is if you're a very submissive man and you're into dominant women and you're like being led around on a leash, or I really don't know at this point. Other than that, I'm not sure if you can do anything right. Like whatever you do, you're in trouble.
Exactly. Like when you mentioned that, then I thought, well, then maybe they'll change their mind and want somebody more assertive, you know, but make the wrong assertion and they can send them off to jail. You know, so yeah, it's Yeah, is legislation going to be more a part of this? So I'm just kind of thinking about the weird ways that this could go.
I mean, especially in relation to the Woody Allen case, which I spoke to Colonel
Yeah,
about. And I've been meaning to make a separate video about it because I love Woody Allen. He's
sure.
one of my favorite directors, filmmakers.
Mhm.
And, you know, the child abuse allegations have been discredited so many times.
Sure.
But what people keep coming back to is that he married the daughter of the adopted daughter of his ex-partner, which is, it's not the best decision you can make in your life.
Right.
But they've been together for like 30 years now, and they've been married for over 20 years. They're clearly in love. They said decades and decades ago, they said they were in love, and they clearly meant it.
Right.
It's like, just leave them alone, you know. And people have to keep coming back to it. Probably Ronan Farrow has a huge role in this, as Diana Davison suggested when I spoke to her.
Right.
But I just feel so sorry for Woody Allen. You know, he's so old. He's getting very, very old, and like, I just don't want him to be remembered like this. It's actually very sad. But the point is that they demonize him for having been attracted to a woman in her late teens.
Right.
Well, sources vary as to when their relationship actually started, but she was probably 20 or 21, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
And they hadn't really been in contact throughout her childhood. That's what people don't understand. He wasn't her stepfather. They didn't even live together.
Right.
And Mia Farrow, it wasn't like a normal family. Mia Farrow adopted 10 children, and she had 4 children of her own. It's like, something is not right there, obviously, because why would anyone want to adopt that many children?
Right.
But to demonize him for being attracted to a young woman, it's like, I just can't get my head around it. Like, there's just no equivalent of that when it comes to women. Like, again, what would it take for a woman, for any woman, to be made fun of for her attraction to someone younger, older, whatever?
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't happen. We just celebrate it. Anyway,
Exactly.
women choose to express their sexuality, it is celebrated to a pathological extent. But
Right.
again,
Like,
men are not supposed to show they are human in any way.
exactly. Like, they seem to be really up in arms about, you know, women looking, you know, men being attracted to women who look youthful, I suppose. Like, you know, because that's kind of almost the point of women's kind of initiative to be attractive, right? It's to look youthful and young, and you know, and you know, it could be that, you know, people are kind of attacking Woody Allen for being an old man that's into, you know, into somebody who is younger. But you know, it's like, it's still a big form of paranoia, because, you know, like, beyond the whole Woody Allen thing, like this happens in the Western world a lot, but, you know, it's like, you know, so, you know, Japanese anime, right? Like, you know, a lot of the times, you know, girls in Japanese anime tend to be really young and youthful looking, like somebody you knew in school or something. And, you know, like, Westerners, like, on social media and everything, are just kind of like, if guys are attracted to this kind of anime, go, you're into children or something like that. So there's like a lot of panic and stupid paranoia about men's, like, desire for the kind of women. You know, it's like, yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but
yeah, as far as I understand, that depiction of what we know as anime has been a part of Japanese culture for quite a long time, right? If you look at Japanese art from hundreds of years ago, you see, like, the precursors of that.
Right.
And obviously, we are supposed to respect, or at least accept, other cultures, unless they somehow don't fit our present day narrative. Then
exactly,
you know, we can attack them as much as we want.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of their way of playing hero, I guess. Just take something, that doesn't take a lot of effort to do, and just turn it into some kind of a crusade, I suppose. So it's a very easy way to earn social brownie points.
And another thing that I find interesting is that, again, we hear a lot about how feminists are really, really desperate to change the way men's brain and attraction and sexuality works. They just disapprove of the very nature of most men's natural sexuality. But then they don't really talk about things like, if you look at Pornhub searches, like the most common keywords, MILF is one of
Mhm.
the most common ones. I think it's constantly in like the top 5, regardless of country or
Sure.
year, whatever. But feminists don't really tend to talk about that because it doesn't fit their narrative. There are a lot of men apparently find older women attractive, but like feminists don't even take time to give some credit to these men. They just trash them when they
Right.
talk about how
Right.
girls in their late teens or women in their early 20s are attractive.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I suppose if they can't use the "this girl is too young" card, then they'll just probably default to the "they're being objectified anyway" card,
Yeah.
I suppose. So yeah.
Objectification is such a funny thing. I've been thinking a lot about it recently, and I still don't really understand it. But I guess I understand where they're coming from with the idea, but I just don't understand why it's wrong.
Me neither, really.
Like, to begin with, I don't really understand the difference between sexual attraction and objectifying someone.
Right.
Well, I really dislike the term objectification because I don't think you treat a person as an object when you're attracted to them. They will say things like, yeah, because you treat them as a piece of meat or whatever. But that's just not true. You you treat them as a person you are attracted to. It is the human being you are attracted to, and you might not want to know their entire family history or like
Right.
every single detail about their lives, but it is a human being. And most men, even if they just want casual sex, it's not like, you could get a sex doll if the object was literally all you wanted.
Yeah. Right.
But and I have nothing against men who own sex dolls, but what I'm
Right.
saying is that I think, or I'd like to think, that most men would still prefer to be with a flesh and blood woman, regardless of how dangerous it is actually becoming.
Right.
It is definitely a lot safer to
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
sex.
I mean, based on my understanding of the way my own sex kind of works mentally with this sort of thing, is that they want someone who, well, of course, there's a criteria that she has to be a woman, unless you're inclined otherwise. But it's the they want to make a connection with that person that would trust you, and it's and kind of accept the any given like virtues and idiosyncrasies of kind of accept you as you are. And I think that's the real quest of men's sexual pursuits. I think it's this kind of thing where it's like if it's just the whole piece of meat thing, then there would have been more uses of artificial objects to facilitate that, and that'll be done with. But no, I think men still find value in establishing that relationship and that connection. This kind of this need to be accepted by something that is like almost the opposite, man and woman, as opposites, as the than he is, sort of. It's kind of like well, that's the way I've been kind of figuring this out in the past few years.
And well, opposites in many ways, also with complementing energies,
Right.
I guess. That's a big part of the whole male-female dynamic, and feminists just misunderstand this so badly. I mean, I've been reading Andrea Dworkin recently.
Sorry.
It's just, I mean, she obviously had problems, and I almost feel bad mocking her because I feel like making fun of the mentally insane. But the problem is that a lot of feminists, a lot of young women these days seem to take that point of view quite seriously. And they just seem to take issue with the very basic, most natural heterosexual act of penetration. I'm not aware of anyone before Andrea Dworkin to have expressed those same concerns. There could have been others, but since her, this idiocy has been resurfacing every once in a while, and it is in the mainstream, and it's pathological for feminists to claim that the very act of penetration is an act of oppressing the female, an act of making her inferior.
Yeah, I guess maybe just
so enraging.
Right. Like really kind of really processing that, being like being the passive agent as opposed to the man who is more like the active player in the sexual act, I suppose. Maybe they're kind of processing it as a form of like self-negating surrender or something like that.
Yeah, but you need to have a very particular mindset.
Yeah.
To start with. You have to suffer from some kind of personality disorder, and you have to have this inherent mindset, the Persephone archetype, I guess. You have to innately view yourself as a victim for you to see it that way.
Right.
Because for someone to view any sexual act as an act of not even dominance and submission, but an act of oppression.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That just means that the very foundation of their argument, their very premise, is that they are powerless. They literally treat themselves or women as objects. I mean, they are the ones objectifying these women, treating them as having no agency, as just a dry leaf being blown around in the wind, who just has things happen to it, but it doesn't actually act. I mean, that is a reasonable definition of objectification, I think.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like women's agency, it's it may be about women's individual freedom, but also means their accountability. And I think they don't want to admit that they want to be accountable, or that they should be accountable.
They don't want to be accountable. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what I found so, almost terrifying about these allegations against Marilyn Manson. I haven't noticed this as much in previous allegations. Well, there were elements of it in the allegations against Harvey Weinstein, but people like Rose McGann at least acknowledged at least she made some reference to her actions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's not like, that is a difficult subject. I don't want to go into that now, but it's not right to blame Rose McGann for what happened to her, but she at least described the events while giving herself some kind of an active role. With Esme Bianco's testimony against Marilyn Manson, what really annoys me about it is this passive language she uses. And I spoke to Diana Davison about this. And this is something that really triggers me, I guess, because Hungarian is my native language.
Uh-huh.
And in Hungarian, we don't use the passive voice in the first person.
Right.
And it always really stands out to me when someone refers to themselves using this passive voice, like this was done to me, I was taken there, and she says things like I was transported. As a woman in her late 20s, a man buys her plane ticket and she was transported to this foreign country, and then it took her 7 years to realize that this was actually human trafficking. So now he actually accuses Marilyn Manson of human trafficking. It turns out, I didn't know this, but apparently there's no statute of limitations for federal crimes, and human trafficking is a federal crime.
Oh.
So it probably took some hours of legal consultation and legal advice for them to reach this conclusion that this way they might be able to press charges. But I mean,
well, it's, you know, it seems like they're, you know, it's like a big game to them to keep on, you know, like do the next bit of legal steps to ruin somebody that they've been with, just for the sake of, you know, not being accountable for it. And it's almost like, you know, these women are attaining their own bit of status for how much they could screw over somebody they used to be with, you know?
And their status as a proud victim too.
Right.
And another thing is that all these women, and even Rose McGowan, who used to be engaged to Marilyn Manson, and right. She's like the greatest darling of Me Too. And even she said that he was not like that at all. He wasn't abusive towards her in any way, but she supports all these women and it's good for them. You know, she's proud of them. So there was like one little spark of rationality there, I guess, when she kind of, you know, at least she said that in the beginning. But
yeah, it seems squandered.
The reaction of the whole Hollywood establishment and all of the mainstream media, mainstream culture, we are celebrating these women now because they are brave enough to come out as victims. And it's like, what courage does it take? They knew exactly that everyone was going to celebrate them.
Right.
I mean, literally, all they're getting is messages of love and respect, and then I guess there must be a lot of young women, maybe even girls, watching these women, looking up at them as role models. You know, it's so inspiring. This, I hope I can be like that one day. You know, it's like there's like a strong woman. Everyone loves her.
Right. Yeah.
Scary.
Yeah. I can't wait to be abused by someone and sue him.
and that's actually something that came up in the allegations against Andrew Cuomo too. One of the accusers, she gave a video interview. I have no idea what her name is, but she starts her allegations by saying that as a child, her mother used to teach her a lot about sexual harassment and sexual abuse. You know, her mother made sure she was aware that this was a very real danger that was always lurking in the corner. And then she talks about how one of the first times she met Andrew Cuomo, she told him about her activism. She was actually an activist speaking out against sexual assault. She didn't say if she had been assaulted at that point, but then she holds it against him. She then says that she was strangely fascinated by my activism against sexual assault, and he would ask me about it. Like, why would he be so interested in that when she was the one who taught him about that? It's like, you know, if he hadn't said anything about it, then she would be accusing him of male chauvinism or whatever. Like, why is he not interested? And this is just an example of how men can just not do anything right.
Right. Like this is getting to the point where, you know, even Persephone herself would be like looking at these women like, what the hell are you doing? But it seemed, because, you know, in our last conversation, you know, you spoke about, you know, women being attracted to men's status is the thing. Now it's starting to seem like the status is becoming a liability. You know, it's like a big red target almost for, you know, something bad to happen down the line for them, I think.
At least once the man starts getting old.
I
mean, it's not like you're immune to allegations when you're younger, but
Right.
It's more likely to happen, well, years down the line in the first place.
Right.
And once the man is kind of, well, not losing status, but like losing something, losing some attractiveness, and
Right.
that can partly be the reason why the woman starts regretting
Yeah.
what happened in her past.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think in the case of Evan Rachel Wood, I think that's purely at the root of her allegations. It's all about regret. It's quite, and a lot of the other women's stories too. You know, people do things when they're young that they might not be very happy about later in life, but then that's the reason. The reason you did those things is that's the reason you're the person you are today. And I guess one positive message could be possibly that maybe we should embrace our past selves and treat our past selves with understanding. And you know, it's the same about when it comes to people that came before us, in this obsession with judging history through the
Right.
eyes, through the lens of the present. And that's kind of what's happening in mainstream culture. Like Churchill is racist now and things
Right.
like that.
Mhm.
And it's kind of an interesting parallel to how women are encouraged to reevaluate their past relationships and reinterpret past experiences as abuse or assault.
Right. Yeah. So, having said this, it's like, when men are kind of targeted, are kind of marked by women as attractive objects due to their status, only to be kind of discarded and get into trouble later. Therein lies a question I have about: is there anything beyond that status that, we've probably been in this territory before, but is there anything within men that are lovable because they are men, not because of some utility or because of their money, as many like to kind of gravitate towards, or something like that, their income, shall we say, or even their disposability. So, and like I want to kind of pin this to like what I have come to know as the puer archetype, right? Is there that youthful spark that's like important in it of itself, like intrinsically? Is there anything, I don't know if this kind of makes sense, but is there something that women gravitate towards in that way? Let me know if I should rephrase the question.
Well, some women do, definitely. But I mean, I don't like speaking about men and women as like monolithic groups because it's different for everyone.
Right.
I think the majority of women are not necessarily attracted to that youthful, puer spark. Partly because it doesn't radiate security. And I'm not saying all women want security from the man, but it is something at least that's a part of the consideration. And with security, I don't just mean physical protection, but just him being consistent and stable, and just how likely is he to want to stay. Like
Right.
that's probably one of the greatest considerations for most women. Not every one of them, depending on what exactly they are looking for, but I think most women are looking for some indication that the man is likely to stay and not leave after one night or a few weeks or a few months.
Yeah, I understand.
And that's not a characteristic, that stability is not a characteristic of the youthful man. You know, it's more a sense of adventure, which is a great thing.
Mhm.
An urge to explore and gain new experiences and all that.
Yeah.
It's not, unfortunately, that's not really attractive to most women.
Yeah, because I think that was the angle I was trying to get at, the sense of adventure and what maybe excites them, I suppose. Like, yeah, I suppose people kind of lose sense of that nowadays, in which, the more demonized men turn out to be, by society, and, even are called useless by those in the more conservative and traditional media, if they aren't, like married, or like or this or that, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess Tommy Lauren expressed these sentiments very clearly.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not particularly happy with her. Yeah.
No, I mean, it was pathetic. It was so difficult to watch. I couldn't watch the whole thing.
Oh yeah. Right. Yeah. It seemed kind of, well, it was downright petulant. It's like, she's really, well off, and turning down all these well-off guys for what standard,
But I like your question though about what beyond status is there about a man that's attractive, just as a human being.
Right.
I guess there are lots of different personality traits that are attractive, and just like, for example, I guess caring, and in like a gentle way, just like showing interest. And that, again, that ties in with this female desire for stability, which is understandable.
Right.
So just little things like that, like, unfortunately, there are a lot of women who will just expect to be taken out on expensive dates and all that, and they will claim to their friends that, yeah, because that's the way the man proves his dedication and his interests and all that. But there are clearly other ways, other more genuine and natural ways of showing their interest. And I think that's probably the single most important consideration for women. Yeah, and again, this ties in with this fear of objectification, because based on their definition of objectification, I guess the opposite of objectification would be when a man shows genuine interest in the woman's personality, the way she sees the world, interests, and all that. So just to see a bit of evidence that the man is interested in you on a personal level.
Right.
Because that sort of interest is not easy to fake. I guess maybe some pickup artists who are especially good at the game might be able to somehow fake that, but but it's not that easy. You can tell if it's a genuine interest.
I suppose, I could guess all day what a woman might like, but I can't really prove it because, if I postulate it, maybe a woman would say, well, either, well, I don't feel like that, or not all women feel like that. So it's like, it's really confusing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the only characteristic close to universal, I think, is this caring personality. Then again, stereotypically, a lot of women are into bad boys, the rebel without a cause type. So that is a thing too, definitely. And that has more to do with the Beauty and the Beast archetype, which is one of the deepest archetypal. It's at the root of most female fantasies of love and romance and sex. It's this desire to be the one who's going to tame the monster. You see that in the most popular romance fiction written for women, but even like Twilight, and I guess 50 Shades of Grey has that element.
Like, so would you say that, men's desire for women is in itself desirable to women? Do you know what I mean?
Well, as it turns out, only if the woman finds the man desirable too, otherwise it's sexual assault.
Exactly, yeah. yeah, that's why I
Obviously,
think,
being desired is, I think, healthy people have that need to feel
right,
like they are desired.
right. It's, it's but I hope you understand why I asked that, because men are confused now. It's like, do they do you wa- do the kind of feeling, do I want to express my desire or don't I? Is it evil of me to do so? Like, am I not respecting the women? If I'm too clear about my attraction, that sort of thing.
It is terribly confusing.
Hmm.
I mean, there are a lot of mixed messages out there, and as a man, I mean, I can't even imagine how confusing it all must be.
Right.
But again, this idea that if you express your attraction or desire in some way that's disrespectful, I mean, it's like, what is that? There's just such a distortion of reality.
Right.
Obviously, you can do it in a disrespectful way.
Right.
Like
Right.
catcalling and wolf whistling are not particularly respectful.
But they're also, they're not guns. They're not, uh,
Not violence.
violence, right? So yeah, I mean, women should probably learn to handle that, better and on the spot. That's,
Yeah, definitely.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've said the same thing several times before, that if a woman doesn't know how to handle situations like that, situations that might make her feel uncomfortable, then she's just not ready for the real world.
Hmm. Right.
I mean, she doesn't need, women like that don't need more laws. They just need to learn life skills.
Right.
That's the only thing that could possibly help them.
Yeah. So more on, like men kind of expressing their lust and stuff, and kind of my hypothesis that that might be something that women may be into. I think rock and roll is a big testament to that. Like, most of the time, classically speaking, a lot of rock and roll is about, lust and girls and stuff like that. It's like men kind of on stage showing off their, expressing their kind of lust via song, and women tend to be all over that, right? Well, or they have been, at least. I don't know if it's true anymore, but
Yeah, although I would include all that in the category of status of some kind, because if you have a nobody singing in a band in a little
yeah,
dive bar
right,
about that, I mean, if he's really good, women are gonna, they might show some interest, but not because of the sentiments he expresses. I think in the case of like famous rock stars, again, they are at the top
hmm,
within that respective field, and
right,
they are very visibly on the top, like
right,
literally on stage, literally physically above
yeah,
everyone else. And there's something innately attractive about that. They're like the leaders of a tribe. I think there are some very ancient carnal instincts that brings to the surface that people feel when they're participating in an event like that. I
right,
mean, I guess music itself, it is like a ritual. It is like a pagan ritual to witness a performance like that. And then I guess the musicians are like shamans. I don't know much about that, but maybe shaman used to be treated as rock stars. Maybe they had groupies too back in the day.
right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about the old, how I was in the old days, but I'm just trying to tie some things together in the present day.
Mm.
So I kind of want to harken back to archetypes here, because it's been a big, archetypes have been a big subject this past year due to one reason or another. It's become a favorite kind of thing. So I find myself most gravitating towards Hephaestus, not just because, you know, I kind of resonate with him as like a creative type, but you mentioned in your video describing Hephaestus as somebody who's kind of, he almost doesn't believe in his own value, and he has to keep on proving himself and to others, maybe like to kind of get, you know, get others to recognize him and something like that. And that really does kind of, for better or worse, it kind of resonates with me a lot, because I'm always kind of showing like my latest creation to people. Hey, check out this new song I made, or, you know, hey, check out this new bit of writing or something like that. I'm badgering Peter Wright all the time with the latest new stuff I come up with, or even it's not some of my own stuff, like, hey, check out this new band or something like, or this new album they have, or something like that, you know. So I, I don't know, like what do you think about that? Do I seem like the Hephaestus type, or?
No, I can see that in you, definitely. It's not just creativity, but being a sensitive person and caring deeply about stuff. So I think that's definitely a trait, and experiencing life on a deeper level. I can see that. And I guess one feature of Hephaestus would be that he works all the time. He works to have stuff to show off to the world. And I can personally relate to that quite well too, because
Right.
I cannot not work. Like, work doesn't mean earning money. It's just like
Right.
working on something.
Exactly, right. Yeah, you
And
know,
I briefly told you about this before, that for me, it has a lot to do with my fear of death and wanting to transcend death by creating something that will outlive me. And I think this is another characteristic of the Hephaestus archetype, because he's the only Olympian god that works, which is I just find it so fascinating.
right.
And he's a god of metalworking, so a lot of the stuff he makes, well, I mean, he's a god, he's immortal,
Right.
but if you relate the archetype to human beings, you know, those types of people will probably want to leave something behind.
Right. It's really kind of putting your essence into the thing, and making sure that your existence has mattered, right? Like it's right. That's kind of the way I've been thinking about it, because, you know, I wanted to be sure, because I'm not one for what one would call an afterlife, right? Like, you know, when I die, I would go to heaven, kind of a thing. I'm not really in tune with that line of thinking, but what I can definitely say is that, you know, since my time is limited, that's why I have to live closest to my values and leave that behind, to kind of pass on to to make it transcend my, you know, my short moment here on this planet, I suppose. So I wonder if that's similar to what you're thinking.
Yeah, I'm trying to turn my attention more to the present moment as much as possible. And I try not to look forward to future events as much. It's nice to have things to look forward to, but I really try to live in the present and just enjoy every moment for what it is.
Right.
So that's not my natural disposition, though, unfortunately. That's something I have to cultivate.
Okay.
I mean, I've always been a natural at appreciating little things in life, you know, just being able to smile or laugh at like something that other people wouldn't even notice. Like, I've always had that, but at the same time, I'm quite anxious type. Like Athena, OCD type of thing.
Right.
So I do think a lot about the future and like the distant future too. So I'm conscious about trying to direct my attention back into the present.
Right. Well,
but I was actually wondering, because you mentioned previously that you can also relate to the puer.
Yeah.
So how does do you see it as complementary to Hephaestus, or how would you say the two relate to each other?
I want so one thing I wonder is that whether it's a matter of the Hephaestus like wanting to show off uh his puer, his own puer essence, in that case, kind of maybe when he's trying to to kind of show off someone, it's not, you know, how much of a drone he can be, how useful he can be, but rather, you know, this is who I am, will you accept me? It's kind of, it's so it's so, you know, because he had it bad as far as my understanding, because from the get-go, you know, he was he cast out by Hera because of how ugly he was and he got more mangled?
Yeah.
Right. So because, you know, so, you know, yeah, that's got to be hell on someone who, and it's, you know, suppressing his prayer down more and more, you know, it's like uh so maybe that's that much more of a motivation to kind of prove, you know, and, you know, when we say prove to others, it's like it's not about catering to others, right? It's about, you know, having others recognize him objectively for who he is, and, you know, and show his essence, I suppose. I don't know if that makes sense, but, you know, it's maybe that's something, because I think the puer is beaten down on a lot of people, and therefore that's why they kind of, you know, are in a state of being slumped, I think, when it comes to men. You know, it's like, you know, men are kind of uh, in resignation, I think, in this world that constantly demonizes them and casts them out of their own spaces, and, you know, no recourse is left for them. So it's, and I'm wondering if the puer is something that we can kind of use as something to bring them back up, I think. I kind of rambled there, but
No, I like that. Yeah. With Hephaestus, my interpretation is that he didn't really have a childhood because he was rejected by his parents, especially his mother. So there's an element of what some psychologists and authors will call reparenting the inner child. It's like a very beautiful concept.
right.
And there are some people specialize in that, like there's meditation, hypnosis sessions for that. That's supposed to be very helpful for people, especially people who suffered early childhood trauma or who were abandoned as children.
Right, yeah. There's one person called Nathaniel Brandon, in his book, Six Pillars of Self-Esteem. He has a lot of exercises about, you know, talk, like if you were to talk to your inner boy, or what have you, then what would you say to him? And it's like it kind of manifests itself in a form of writing exercises. So that's something I've tried that's been of some help to me. So I think I know what you're talking about there. Because when you think about it, you know, like I'm thinking about, you know, the culture I grew up in Japan, right? Like it seems to me that, you know, for every bit of for every element that, you know, tries to promote childhood via media and like all the really clever toys and, you know, games and stuff like that they have, but at the same time, you know, children are forced by their parents to go to cram school and, you know, just be like academic almost 24/7, all the way up to late nights. And I had a lot of friends that I just couldn't play with because, you know, they're off to cram school or something. And, you know, so I'm imagining it's screwing them up really bad, I think, in terms of that puer archetype.
Yeah, I heard it about most of the East Asian cultures, Korea too. I think it's a very similar culture.
Yeah.
From an early age, they're just taught to, well, when they're children, they're just supposed to be studying all the time. And then once they start working, they work often 7 days a week. And yeah, actually, I had a cousin. My cousin was working for a Japanese company at one point in Hungary. And there's just this funny story that they pretty much expected them to work 7 days a week. I mean, they did manage to get the weekends off, but sometimes they had to go in the office on Saturday and Sunday. And then Christmas was coming up, and he just didn't come to work, obviously, on Christmas Day. And then his boss called him, what's going on? Why aren't you at work? And he just says, well, this is Christmas. Okay, well, and then the next day again, he didn't turn up, and his boss calls again, like, why aren't you at work? And he just says, well, it's still Christmas. And his boss just wouldn't understand, like, how long does this Christmas last? Like, what's going on?
Right, like
it shows their mentality.
Yeah, like to the Japanese though, like Christmas is this kind of, it's more like a how do I put it? It's like, well, there's obviously the presents, right? And there's like the trees and stuff like that. And then it's just really, it's about Kentucky Fried Chicken. That's what it's all about. It's like, just getting Christmas chicken. That's my understanding. That's what I've been, so it's just this kind of, it's not a religious connotation at all, it seems. It's like, it's just some occasion like Halloween. Yeah, that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, in all these cultures, you can tell that they are pretty cerebral. They're all like, again, it's not nice to generalize about entire cultures, but they train their people to be pretty much in their heads all the time. And there's not much space for playfulness. Like if all you do is work, even if you have some free time, you'll be so exhausted. You won't really have an opportunity to discover who you really are. You're encouraged to sell your soul to a company and just to dedicate your whole existence to serving that purpose. And that's not what life should be about, I think. I don't judge people who choose to live like that, but I don't think most people would choose to live like that if they had a choice.
Exactly, right. Yeah, I mean, maybe kind of some liberation from that sort of expectation. Of course, learn to take care of yourself as an adult, right? And get some kind of stability. That's something that can be applied to men and women, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, it's like you've got to, like, I would advocate, just you don't be ashamed of your childhood, right? The fact that you're a kid, I suppose that's the problem. Maybe people are ashamed of what they used to be, and they want to suppress it deep down, I think, in order to be accepted, I suppose. Like, many people use failure to launch as like, people who aren't adult enough for somebody else's tastes or something. That's kind of the way I've processed it. But I don't know. I think maybe men should be a little bit more defiant about that and say, no, I can take care of myself, but I'm also going to do whatever the hell I want,
Then there's also the flip side of that, which I can sense a bit of a contradiction there, but I think I can explain the reason for it. This emergence of safe spaces and this rhetoric that a lot of young people use these days. They even turned adult into a verb. Like adulting is a thing. Like I can't adult today.
Yeah,
things like that.
I hate it. Adulting. God.
So, but that's not what you are talking about, because those people, like, they don't want to experience this all the potential freedom and all the potential for play and self-discovery that childhood might hold. This sense that you can be whoever you want to be. You are free to decide. They don't want that. Again, they're like feminists. They just want safety and security. They want to be coddled. They just want this suffocating hug of the great mother state.
Right.
Never lets go of them. And that's not freedom. That's a very sick view of childhood. The helicopter parent that's always watching you. So that's not a real childhood that they're yearning for either. They're just yearning for the illusion of the safe and warm womb, I guess, to carry that sensation into adult life.
Exactly right. It's just this aberrant thing that they think is like uh, is due them, I suppose, because because they're they want to be protected from every grievance that they might have, and they might any kind of inconvenience is like a big human rights issue or something. That's and so in a way it's very much like feminism. So, yeah.
My understanding is that one thing about the puer and the puella, which is the female version,
Right.
is that it's kind of self-contained, so it's complete as it is, and it has immense potential to explore and express
Right.
its own
Well,
nature.
right. I would distinguish it as, it's not about the petulant kid that, wants things done to him, by their parents that might spoil them or something. But it's more like, that that curiosity, I suppose, that kind of, I don't want to say risk taking, but maybe there's something to it. Just kind of just exploring and, just, knowing what he kind of wants to be, I think, you know?
Yeah, and being able to take care of himself or herself. So that's another thing that differentiates it from these adult children at universities, and also from the mother's hero, which subjugates himself to the will of another.
Right.
So I think that's a pretty important distinction with the puer, and that's why
Yeah.
feminists and so much of mainstream culture shun men like that.
Right. Yeah.
Because they are perceived as not serving a greater good.
Right. It's like, stop spending so much time with your car and spend time with me instead, or like, or forget your hobbies or something like that. It's like, I'm good friends with people that invest a lot in like any kind of hobby they're into, and like some of the stuff, it's pretty great to see because because I have some friends that play things like Warhammer and BattleTech, and it's all these tiny but somewhat expensive models that they always paint and use. It's like all this meticulous work that goes into, like, that's one aspect of masculinity in general that I think is underrated, is that capacity to kind of work on something really small, like and detailed, that's one thing I've always thought was really cool about masculinity, I guess. Most people kind of overemphasize the more bigger world aspects and kind of the physical prowess, but I think that keen eye and attention to detail is also a masculine trait that I think it needs a little bit more emphasis on.
Yeah, the ability to stay focused on one thing, and a bit of a potential for tunnel vision in a way, to shut out the outside world and just stay incredibly focused on that one thing. That's probably the single biggest reason most great scientists and artists have been men.
Right.
Fewer women have that ability. It's like an obsession.
Right.
That seems disproportionate to the outside world, because you dedicate so much of your existence and so much of your attention to that little thing, but that's exactly the reason you're gonna end up being so good at it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Freud, for example, kind of interpreted that as a form of projection. And then obviously he was very intent on explaining everything, like always talking about childhood trauma and how the horrors of childhood and all that. And it's like, the way he described it is that the man has to create an identity separate from his mother.
Right.
And that's a form of projection, and that's why men are naturally destined to project and to create things, to have this inner drive to create stuff, which not that many women have. A lot of women have it, but more men have it, and more men have it to the extent of the genius.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about of a boy defining oneself against his mother, though. Like, it's like, in as much that he needs to kind of set his own standards and kind of go his own way, so to speak. Then yeah, I think it does kind of make sense, especially when the parent is kind of overprotective and kind of wants to micromanage every aspect of a boy's life. Maybe it's uh, I think the more that happens, the more pushback. I think if he's not swallowed completely, you know.
Yeah, and it is very important to find that balance when you're parenting a child, which I don't think I will ever do, but like in theory, I understand the importance of holding them on a long leash. It's not the best imagery, but like
Right.
kind
Well,
of
I get what you mean.
keeping a watchful eye on them, but then allowing them to explore
Right.
and to experience a bit of danger and climb trees. And that's why, again, that's why it's so important to have the dynamic, male-female dynamic between the father and the mother,
Right.
because the father is likely to be the one who encourages the child to take
Right.
more risks and to explore and then to climb the tree. And then the mother might kind of free negotiate it. You can climb the tree, but don't climb all the way to the top. And
Exactly.
those two forces are very important when raising a child.
Right. Yeah. Like I'm thinking of like a personal anecdote here, like which so there was one time in school that we were kind of supposed to paint our ideal school campus, right? Right. So and and it was for a contest or something. There was a national contest, right? And I had a pretty good idea, right? And but the thing is, like, in doing so, like, my mother was like super strict and making sure I do this thing right and that thing right. Like, I just remember, it's like I I remember just that kind of strain more than I did actually painting that. Right. Now the thing is, it sort of paid off in the end because I got second prize nationally on that contest, and I got to travel somewhere else, to receive the award and everything. But it's like it, that was memorable for good and bad reasons. It's like I just had some bad memories associated with it. You know, I don't know. I don't know why I feel like
It paid off, but I understand that, like, it can get to really pathological levels where she just completely takes over, and then you end up living your whole life trying to please your mother or your father. And a lot of people actually never end up becoming independent from their parents that way. A lot of people end up living their whole lives trying to please their parents,
Right.
and developing a separate existence.
Well, I think we've been going on for about an hour and a half, almost, I think. So, thanks for all the great input you had today. Thanks for talking to me. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Like, what are you working on right now?
I have a lot of new videos in the works. I'm also launching a second YouTube channel
Okay.
very soon, within a month, which will be an ASMR channel. I have recently qualified as a hypnotherapist and hypnotist, so I'll be making use of those new skills that I have learned. And this will be something new, something interesting to explore and experiment. And I'm also hoping to do a lot more interviews for my first YouTube channel, so I'm keeping myself busy.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for having me. It was great fun.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for joining me today and answering my questions. Thanks for joining me again. After that first time, I'm just glad you had a good time.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Well, where can we find you? You have a Patreon, right?
Yes, Greta Aurora on YouTube. I have a Patreon, and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I'm also on Gab. It's the Greta Aurora on Gab. So yeah, I'm pretty easy to find.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for joining me again, Greta. And see you all next time for wherever my next interview is.